Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas. Sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's presentation of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Moffet, and I'm in Burrowang in New South Wales. It is Wednesday afternoon, and it gives me great pleasure to be talking to somebody in my own time zone, in my own state, and my own country, and that is a good friend of mine, Neil Osborne, who's up in Sydney, in part of Sydney, that doesn't like to be called part of Sydney, the Northern Beaches. They're the Insular Peninsula, as they're well known. But I've been there a couple of times, snuck in, snuck out. But Neil, I've known for a number of years. We met through professional coaching, and we've been good friends. And then we reunited in the Professional Speakers of Australia, and so it was a presentation that Neil did for the New South Wales chapter of Professional Speakers Australia that. I thought this would be something interesting for dentists to hear, because Neil uses this presentation to help doctors, including plastic surgeons, to help patients get the treatment that they need, they want, and they should be having. So, Neil Osborne, welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.
Thank you, David. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thank you very much.
No, Neil, it's a pleasure to have you. And like I said, you and I reconnected when you joined the Professional Speakers Association a couple of years ago, and you've been an active participant at our monthly events. And it was great to hear you do a presentation last month. And as soon as I heard it, I thought this is something that dentists do need to hear and see. And I think it'll be great for you to share that information with the dentists listening both here in Australia as well as overseas in North America, UK, in Asia, India, New Zealand, all places. You wouldn't believe where this goes to. But Neil, you said in your bio that you have had 30 plus years of successful selling in the health and beauty industry. So let's unpack that as to how you came from, because I knew you were in the hair products market, and now you're more into the plastic surgery market. So let's unpack that journey through the health and beauty industry.
Yeah, well, firstly, I think the emphasis, David, is on not so much the 30, but the plus, if I could put it to you that way. I grew up with Mum. Mum was a hairdresser, and my first vivid memory was a 7-year-old handing up to Mum perm rods when I was a youngster, surrounded by women in a hairdressing salon. That was my Saturday morning job, scraping lacquer off atomizers of years gone by. And for many, many years, I hung around Mum's environment and had the pleasure of really getting to, I suppose, understand how the other half communicate, which today has put me in a tremendous place. But specifically, I started out very young as a Weller sales rep, selling perms to hairdressing salons at the ripe old age of 19. And I had, at that point, a gentleman by the name of John Shepherd, who was my sales supervisor, who would sit in the passenger seat of my car, walk in beside me into a hairdressing salon, listen to what it was I'd said, and then would come out and critique what I'd done. And I didn't know any better, so I just did whatever John told me to do. And by the age of 20, I was the state supervisor of a sales team of 14 people in New South Wales. 21, I was the state manager of Queensland and won the national trophy that year, and it was a trip to Tahiti for the highest growth in sales, and that was actually selling to pharmacies in those days. At 22 was the state manager of New South Wales, and quickly discovered that I'd come across what's called today the Peter Principle. They had promoted a very good rep into a manager's role, but they'd forgot to teach me how to be a manager. And I was managing 10 and 15 people that were, 10 years plus my age, and it was just overwhelmed. So I cut the cord and pulled the pin and went surfing for 3 to 6 months, as you do at that age. I then came back into the industry through an Australian hair care brand called Delva, and got to meet a man of great inspiration, Vincent De Lorenzo. And from that point on, I actually rebirthed myself back into the hairdressing industry, and ended up distributing a brand that he built. In between, I had some corporate experience. I worked for Polaroid Sunglasses, Time Magazine, Giovanna Cosmetics, all in marketing and sales roles and managing very large domestic sales teams. But it wasn't until I started to get back in the distribution business when De Lorenzo launched their own brand. They'd sold Delva to Reckitt and Coleman in those days. And I became one of their state-based distributors. And it was all on commission only. And I was like full of beans and full of confidence. So I gave up my corporate job, gave up my Ford Fairmont gear or whatever it was in those days, and bought myself a van and started delivering shampoo to people. And for the next 18 years, I built De Lorenzo, Matrix, which is an international hair care brand, Tony and Guy, or TG, which is their hair care brand, and also Shortcut Software. And each of those I managed to secure the distribution rights for, and all of them but De Lorenzo I sold off, with L'Oreal buying me out of Matrix at the end of that journey, which was, a nice little lotto truck backing up to the house at the time. I then moved back into sales, and funnily enough, I went back to De Lorenzo. So Delva for the first time, De Lorenzo, and then I was back at the national sales manager's role where I had 30 people under me. And all I did was train them, and then I trained them, and then I brought in guest speakers to train them, and then I brought in somebody else with a different... And we were a multi-million dollar company, and we had tremendous growth, the largest growth the company has ever achieved. And today, still, 15 years later, the highest turnover the company has ever achieved in 1 year, purely because I decided to train people. And it was an amazing experience. I then went on to be the international sales manager. That was the 4th time I was with that company. They kept on inviting me back. You thought they would have learned, wouldn't you? But anyway. Since then, I started a business coaching practice because I wanted to put back. I thought the time had come for me to put back to the industry after, having some successful ventures and making some good money. And since then, I discovered something in particular. And that was something I was reminded of back in the very early days. We were told when I was a Weller, and that was in the very first days when people started to sell product out of salons, and most of us would remember those days. Go in and you tell them what's in it, the pH and it's got wheat germ oil, and you tell them all the ingredients. And because of my hairdressing background, I actually discovered something different. They didn't want to know what was in the product. They wanted to know how to open up the conversation with the clients because they'd never done that before. And in my early days, that was part of my secret to great success, was that I helped people not just buy my product, but sell through my product. And that was something I developed a huge following for. And I've had many, many bizarre situations of people who come back to me years later and said, oh, thanks for helping me with that and this. All because I got to understand that the people that I was selling to had to sell my services or product on, and they just didn't know how to do it. And while the company was telling us, go out and tell them what's in the bottle, they went, who cares? We want to know, how do we introduce it to somebody? How do we do this? When do we say this? And once if they say no, what do we do? and all of these amazing things. So when I started my coaching journey, I started mentoring some young brands and helping them build their distribution. And lo and behold, I discovered yet again that people were out there selling a product. And they were out there selling logical fact, where what they needed to sell was emotion. Yeah? It's what things do for people as to why people buy, not what it is that you're offering. So there's my short story. Emphasis on the plus. I'm sure you can work out the rest, but a scattered journey, but one with a common thread.
Yeah, very common thread, and it's fairly well known amongst good salespeople that people buy 100% with emotion, and then they justify their purchase with logic later on.
I agree with you that a lot of people know it, but very few people do it. See, there's a difference in our world between knowing and doing, right? Everyone knows, but very few people do. Only the successful people do.
So in selling, I guess, hair products, it's how does it feel when you use it, and what are you going to look like as a result, which creates the emotion, as opposed to it's got weak germ and pH of 6.7 or 7.3 or whatever.
David, I hope you don't mind, but whether we use hair care, skin care, aesthetics, plastic surgery or dental, this philosophy that I'd like to take a moment to share with you is all going to apply because it stems from what you just said. See, what you just said was all statements. You're telling people information. Well, I've discovered that people don't need to know everything to buy. They just need to know what's relevant to them. So if we look at the old style of that dirty four-letter word, sell, because nobody likes to be sold to. I don't care who you are. Very few people like to be sold to, right? So if you look at that dirty word and we break it down, the key behavior of a selling behavior is telling. Some of us call it educating our clients. Well, for me, that's still selling because that's why they glaze over. That's why they zone out, because what you're doing is you are giving them, page and verse of something that may or may not be relevant to them, but you think it is. See, what we need to do is we need to interject this behavior with persuasion. And persuasion is an asking behavior. Because only when we ask do we know how to answer. Just think about this for a moment. Salespeople spray and pray. Yeah? I'll keep on talking and they'll eventually say yes. Rubbish. Okay, people glaze over. People today, especially, I don't know why, but post-COVID, we all seem to be a little bit more packed in cotton wool and we need to be given room to buy. We no longer like to be sold to. And this is the most common error I see in today's communication, and that is people downloading information. Oh, I'll send you an email and with it comes a 25-page attachment and 3 other forms. I say stop. There are 3 really good emails you could do 1 week apart to keep engagement with the client. You don't send it all to them at once. Let's think about how we like to digest information. See, selling is overloading. Persuasion is leaving breadcrumbs for people to follow as you understand what it is that they need to know.
It happens in dentistry all the time, Neil, and the patient doesn't have a dental degree, but the common thing that I hear from dental assistants is that the dentist starts to teach the patient a dental degree. And so that ties back to the presentation that you gave to the Professional Speakers Association was called Persuasion is the New Black. So let's break that down because it was refreshing to hear that information again in a different form. My role is to persuade dentists that they can't do everything themselves and they should get coaching for the parts of their practice that are labour intensive and also skill intensive that they don't have, so that they can then concentrate on the things that they enjoy doing that are more profitable for them to use their time. It's the old, you don't mow the lawns if you can rest up or work on your business.
Well, to put it into simple terms, we call that leverage. How can you leverage your time, your skill, your overheads, your team, whatever it might be, your qualifications? How can you leverage that to create a financial return? And the simplest way to impress people the most is to learn to ask really good, thought-provoking questions. It guarantees you that you will impress those people. You show your skill, you show your knowledge by the depth of the question you ask, not by the volume of data you download. Because what do you learn when you do all the talking? You learn nothing. You're only saying what you already know. You only learn something about this person, this individual, by asking them a really well-framed question and really listening. See, most people listen with the intent to interrupt. We need to listen with the intent to understand and respect. So, one of the things that I've learned as I've gone through this pathway and, as I moved from hair and into beauty and as I started to develop this business, I was then followed the money, as we call it. We joke about it as the aesthetic business, the injectable business, the cosmetic business, the cosmetic surgery business blossomed. And I realized that they have the same problem as dentists and everybody else. And that is that they start with, actually, the best piece I heard, David, you'd love this. The average doctor's consultation lasts 11 seconds before the doctor interrupts.
Oh, no.
Common stated fact. Now, it just goes to show how dense we are with wanting to deliver volumes and dense volumes of information. We don't need to do that. See, some people may only need to know the first page of the book to buy. Very few people need to know all the pages. Some people will just need to know the chapter headings. So if we think about how we can compartmentalize our information, there's a very simple method to follow, and it's a 3-step process that I would like to guide you through, if that's okay, for our purpose of our listeners. First of all, if you in your mind was to, let's pick an easy model, let's pick a circle, and let's divide it into 3 slices of the cake, and each slice is approximately the same size. Visually, I think you can just get where I'm going here. It's a very simple model, and, well, there's no need to make it complicated because it's simple. Only rocket science is complicated, and that's rocket science. This stuff is simple. It's really a pattern we simply need to follow. And it goes like this. The first stage of it is what we call persuasion. See, most of us are busy. Most of us interject with a client in some premeditated form. Just finished with the last client. Oh my God, I've got to prep. Oh my God. Oh, quick, they do look at the form and then off we go. Versus going, hey, there's an opportunity here for me to adjust how receptive this client is. And the way we do that is we do it through what we call reframing. Now, for those of you who have, dived into NLP, you're probably familiar with this term. But reframing is really looking at someone's mood, let's call it in simple terms. How is someone presented? Are they preoccupied? Are they busy? Are they distracted? Are they going to really even listen to what you're going to say? Probably not. So how do we gain their attention? And more importantly, how do we move them into what we call a yes frame? A frame of mind where they're more open. Now, Oxford University has done a plethora of research in this area, behavioural studies, and all of these types of things, and they've discovered one very simple thing. And then there is one word, when repeated a minimum of 3 times, and probably not much more than that, can move people's mindset into a more positive or what's called a yes frame. And believe it or not, the word is yes. So therefore, if we want to persuade, set somebody up, because by the way, anyone who comes into a dental practice, they get prepared mentally, physically, don't they? They get prepared physically on the bed or wherever, on the chair or whatever we call it. But do you prepare your clients mentally? Well, that's what I want you to do. And what I want you to do is I want you to ask 3 short, closed-ended questions that get a yes. Now, David, you and I were talking the other night about how a patient can fill out a data sheet about themselves. Well, that can be real simple. Can I just read make sure I'm reading your writing correctly, Mary? You're at Smithville, is that right? Am I reading that correct? She goes, oh, yes. You go, oh, that's lovely. And Mary, it's Mary at mary.com. Is that with an AU? Is that right? Yes. Oh, lovely. And this is your first visit. Is that right, Mary? Yes. Lovely. So how can I help you today? Now, there's just 3 simple examples I've just pulled out of the air, but there's so many different ways that you can get a yes, yes, yes. Oh, and by the way, you need to know you're going to get a yes. So if you know it's raining outside, you simply say, hey, Mary, is it still raining outside? Yes. Oh, Mary, is it still sunny outside? Yes. Now, this is when the critic comes out because everyone just goes, oh, yeah. But I have to tell you, I've taught this concept to thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And the majority of people who actually go and do it come back and just go, I don't believe how much of a difference that makes now. They seem to just neutralise, they be more open, they're easier to converse. And by the way, they answer my questions better when they're in a yes frame. So this is just such a simple thing that we can do. And there are many, many other tools that we can use at this introductory stage. But this is probably the one that I'm most well known for, but more importantly, has the greatest impact. So, David, maybe, some of your audience could be considering, gee whiz, how do I quickly build rapport? Because, by the way, to move into the second phase, which is to start to persuade people, we also need to be starting to think about, well, how do we do this? So, firstly, we shift them and get them into the right space. Secondly, when we start to move into the persuasion stage, we start to hear these words. I want, says the patient. I want. Oh, and by the way, they've Googled it. They probably almost know as much of you at the lay level to say, I want this, or I want my teeth whitened, or I want this, or I want that. You look into their teeth and you quietly shake your head and go, by Jove's, you need, which is something far more involved, complicated, complex, or expensive than what they may think they need. This is the gap that I find most practitioners, most people who are in this face-to-face consultation process struggle with enormously. Because how do you take someone from their opinion to your opinion plus a couple of $100 or even sometimes a couple of $1,000? Well, there is a very simple process. And again, I'd like, if I could please, to guide you and give your listeners a couple of tips where they can consider starting to open up this journey. First and foremost, the moment they say, I want, we normally go, open up, and we normally start to put forward our opinion fairly quickly or ask a couple of probing, very direct questions. Well, there's 3 layers to any consultation. There is the clinical consultation component. There is the procedural consultation, which are very logic-driven. And this is where most practitioners spend a lot of their time focusing on making sure they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's and downloading lots of information. But Jenny is influenced by the 3rd thread of the pathway, which is the emotion attached to what's going on here. And how often do we hear a dentist or anyone even in cosmetic surgery, they don't even go there. They do not even go there when someone has, a nose that needs rework, or eyelids that are too droopy, or I won't go into any of the other intimate areas. But, these things people buy because of emotion. They justify with logic. So we need to understand their interests. And the way we do that is, rather than responding to the want with our opinion or our thoughts, we actually get to understand minimum of 3 reasons why that want's important. Now, What we do here is we actually find out what's important to this person, not the previous person, not the 5 clients that you've already had this morning. No, this person. And we normally just say something just as simple as, oh, right, teeth whitening, yep, do lots of that. We specialise in that space. But may I ask, can you tell me a little bit more about what it is you're looking to achieve? Can you tell me a little bit about why you've chosen today? Can you tell me a little bit about the result you want to see? Not, oh, here's a chart, you can go from 0 to 10 and pick your number and, forget all that stuff. That's all the logical stuff. Ask 3 good open-ended questions to get to understand what's going on in that patient's mind. And what you're about to hear is gold. And I'll even teach some practices to say, may I ask, why is it that you chose us? Because, by the way, when they tell me the 3 reasons that they've chosen you as a dentist, I will be using that down the track to justify my price. But more importantly, I get to hear what this person's opinion is. And that is gold. Very few salespeople explore this. Most people who are selling problem, solution. You've got this problem. You've got a square. I've got a round circle. I'm going to drive my round circle into your square. It's so problematic in the way that we go about it. So if we can understand more about, and I'm not talking about life story. I'm simply talking about understanding the emotional importance. People come to a dental practice, I would assume, for one of 2 reasons: problem or cosmetic. That would be fair, David, generally speaking?
And more often than not, Neil, it's problem. Either they have one or they want to avoid one.
Yeah. Yep. People are drawn towards or drawn away from, whichever term you want to use, 100%. Okay. But at the end of the day, they also are very conscious today, and especially today, more so than ever, as to how their teeth present. Mm-hmm. Yes? It's part of the cosmetic package. They say when and excuse me, but when a woman separates in a relationship and wants to, beautify herself, they start with the teeth and then they move on from there. And this is quite often even now why some dentist practices are doing Botox, because, they're the first step in the beautification process before, other treatments come into play. And it's quite common language when we get into especially cosmetic surgery, this cycle that people go through. Us blokes haven't quite applied ourselves to that circle yet, but anyway, we will. And we are starting to in some ways. But persuasion, very simply, is simply to understand emotionally what it is that people want. And you, as a professional, guide them to what they need to fulfill that want. And the deeper that you understand that want, the higher the price can be.
Well, even it's really even important, Neil, just in talking about back teeth and chewing. One of the things that I found in my dental career was that most people lose their teeth. And so once they've said that, then all I have to do is say, well, this is what was the best way to keep that tooth, to keep those teeth, and just keep tying it back to that. You don't want to lose your teeth, do you? And they go, no, I don't.
Oh, okay.
So that's the anchor.
Yep. And that is definitely an outcome that people want to work towards. However, it's like I was drawn into, I work for a lot of laser companies in the skin rejuvenation area, and one of them has bought out laser hair replacement. So the whole placement of the hair is done by robotics. And this equation relates to very much talking to about a male losing his hair. Do you want to go bald? Well, no, I don't. But more importantly, may I ask you, if you were to go bald, how would that make you feel? Now we really get the answer. Now we've actually dug a little bit deeper, and we then simply say, well, gee whiz, we don't want to go there. How about you and I work together to take you this way? And lo and behold, now we partner with the patient to explore the journey. And we work on it together. And the better that we understand their emotional motivators, the more that we can go, well, I'm going to guide you. I want to guide you to the right way, and I'm going to try to make it as cost effective as I can. But more importantly, I want to help you achieve that goal where you can smile with confidence, not have bad breath, not be perturbed by discomfort with your teeth while you're traveling, whatever it might be. Because for some people, the fear of having a dental problem overseas, I think, is equally as great, especially when you hear about some of the cosmetic journeys people have been going on overseas. It's just incredible. Anyway, we won't go there. It's a whole other subject, David, isn't it?
It is, Neil. But you've certainly got my attention in terms of framing things up in the persuasion phase, as you call it, and getting the patient to open up and really share how they're going to feel with the result that they're asking you to provide for them.
Yep. Now, some of this early assessments can also be done using NLP framing as well. You know, there are people who are very visual. There are people who are very, auditory in their communication style. There are people who are kinesthetic in their, so we maybe also need to, and we teach how to brush up on that space so that you can be saying the right thing to the right people. If that makes sense. So, for example, if you receive somebody who is, presented well, because visual people really do present themselves well because they're very focused about how they are seen, we would tend to use more language like, so how do you think that outcome would look? See, that's a visual word that they will connect to. If we were to be talking with someone who is more auditory, now, by the way, the bulk of the population is either visual or auditory or a combination. But if we were to speaking to someone who really needs to talk things out, they need to be heard. And we can't be the doctor and interrupt them in 11 seconds. That is not building rapport. So we might say to them, so how does that sound? What we've talked about, how does that sound? Now, these are just examples of how, by understanding these different styles, we can actually just adjust, because we must remember, people like people who are like themselves. So the more that we can understand their style, their communication, it's another layer upon body language, I suppose. But, I think of my wife, who's a kinesthetic woman, and, for her, she needs to sit with things. I'm not too sure how that feels. Kinesthetic people quite often will talk a little bit slower. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's like, your hair color is different to my hair color. I mean, it's just, we're still the same people. We just have got slightly different personalities. But we, as the professional, need to learn how to adjust to connect with those people. Because the better we connect, the better they understand, versus this is the way I do my consultation. Unfortunately, you're going to have lots of misses if that was to be the approach.
But even that simple question, Neil, at the end, like after you've stated something and you're looking for feedback from your patient, how do you feel about that, is a far better thing to say to the patient than what do you think? Because thinking creates a logical answer, and it takes a long time to eliminate that logical thought out of their brain that you've just put in their brain.
100%. So again, if you were to say to a visual person, I'm a very visual person. Visual people use their hands, they talk quickly, they're animated, they're quick decision makers. So if you're talking to a visual person, you can almost use what we call an assumptive close. Oh, that sounds really good. How about we get on and do that? And oh yeah, they'll go with that. You do that with a kinesthetic person and they'll perceive that as pressure. They'll receive that and feel very uncomfortable about that. Yet, by us simply brushing up on some of these things, we can just make these subtle adjustments and learn to make our patients and clients' visits so much less abrasive, so much more comfortable. And by doing so, we get out of the way and we let them by. It's amazing how much we get in the way. And normally that comes to in the what we call the third step of our very simple 3-step module program that we're talking about here. And the third step is we call it Persuasion. Now, in the English language, that's called a portmanteau. A portmanteau is when you join two words together to become one. And Persuasion is to how to help your patients and clients spend more through the art of persuasion. Remember, persuasion is an asking behaviour, not a telling behaviour. So therefore, to reach the final stage in what I call reaching agreement, not closing. I don't believe closing, it's an old-fashioned term. For me, it brings about the wrong connotations. We're reaching agreement. We're both in this together. It's a partnership, you know? And with any good consultation process, whatever market business sector we're in, we want to be able to create this partnership. So the way we ask people to buy, funnily enough, is with a question. Most people use a statement, and it goes like this. The process we need to go through is, I think the first thing we need to do is maybe do a clean, and then the second thing I think we need to do is this, and then the third thing I think we need to do is some teeth whitening. And then they wonder why they get silence. Now, the reason why they get silence, David, is because where's the question? They were all statements. So the patient doesn't know how to answer. See, people only answer when there's questions. This is our courtesy. This is our style of language. This is the way the good old Aussie vernacular works, isn't it? Where we actually pay the courtesy of asking people questions and people with courtesy respond. So if you are experiencing silence in your consultations, the reason being is that you are making what I call offers, and all you need to do is add a little hook to that, and it simply goes like this. How does that sound? Would you like to do that? Would that suit what you're looking for? Would that help you? Would you like me to see if I've got any time to do that? Would you like to do that today? See, by simply adding what we call a closed-ended question, hunting for a yes or a no at the very end, lo and behold, what you get is the prompt to go, well, come on, Jenny, you've got to answer me now. And it becomes so much simpler. Oh, and I really would like to head towards the ending of this process because it's the most common questions I get, David, and that is, what do I do when they say no, and how do I handle objections? So may I just jump to those two to help round off our conversation today. The first one is most people go fight or flight when they hear a no. You know, no. Oh, that's not a problem. Oh, that's okay. Oh, maybe I can make it a note on the record card and we can think about that next time. And they flight, they run away. Or fight, they push on. Oh, no, look, I really think it's the right thing. And that is where pressure comes from, because the only way they can do that is by talking. So that's not a real good scenario. And we need to understand that the client is also experiencing pressure there as well. So what we need to do is we need to diffuse that pressure. And the way we diffuse the pressure is we use a 4-worded statement, and it simply goes like this. I think I'll leave that today, David. David, that's not a problem. And that's the diffusing statement. But here's the beautiful thing. I can now counter offer now that I've diffused, and it goes like this. David, that's not a problem. Would you like me to consider a couple of other options for you? Now, that's a closed-ended question. But funnily enough, they don't necessarily say yes or no. They normally will spill out what is their concern, their hidden objection, if you want to call it that, or what's been going on in their mind, more importantly. When we diffuse, we reduce the pressure both for them and us by saying, and again, David, downward flexion, that's not a problem. Would you like me to consider some other options? And what most people will do is they will then suggest, oh, well, actually, look, it's not my pay cycle. Could I actually start something in 4 weeks' time? Whatever. And this is the skill of also handling objections. See, most people will either say no, or better still, oh, can I think about it? So what's a can I think about it? That's coming from a person who dislikes confrontation. So rather than them saying no, they actually retreat by saying, I'll think about it. They have learnt from behaviour of other salespeople that when they say to people, I'll think about it, some salespeople think that's a yes in disguise. It's not. It's a no in disguise. So therefore, when we get that, we treat it exactly the same as a no. David, that's not a problem. Would you be maybe open to telling me a little bit more about that so I can understand that from your perspective? Again, they don't say yes or no. They give you an expanded answer. David, that's not a problem. Would you like me to consider some other options for that treatment? Well, actually, yeah, I was really worried about blah. Can I maybe only do blah and blah? See, we have to work out ways to keep the conversation going when we get a no. And by doing so, we find out what's going on in their inner thoughts and it becomes a solvable situation. Most people can double their inquiries, double their recommendations, upsells, cross-sells, if you want to use that term, and more importantly, double the amount of extra treatments people book when they learn to understand that emotion needs to be actioned, triggered, and respected during these conversations. And when it is, persuasion becomes very powerful.
I love that reflection or agreement with them when they put up an objection and saying, Neil, that's not a problem, and then just moving to a solution rather than moving into or a choice solution rather than moving into an argument.
Yeah, or a justification. Most of us justify when we get a no, yeah?
Yes.
Oh, well, and straight away, people are physically moved to these two positions where if we can simply neutralise that by saying, Jenny, that is not a problem. And then before I propose options, I ask, is it okay to propose options? See, the more challenging the question is, the more I preamble. Now, David, I'm sure you can appreciate during this situation, I may need to ask a slightly more difficult question. I hope you would be okay with that. Now I can ask any question I want versus bang, just coming out of nowhere with it. So there are a plethora of different pathways that we can take, but the key is diffuse. Take the pressure away.
Neil, one of the ones that you used last month in that presentation of the professional speakers was the discussion about fees being too high, which is something that every patient, and in fact every non-patient in the world believes that dentists charge too much.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and it's probably the most common initial objection that we get. Would that be a fair call?
Very much so.
Okay, so let's just unpack that for a minute. What are they really saying? Are they really saying that it's expensive? Or is it something else that's going on? Because when we receive objections from people, they tend to give you the first one as if it was a very, what we call a public objection. In other words, they would happily walk out on the street front and say to anybody, oh, he wanted me to spend $1,000 just to get my teeth cleaned. Oh, that's ridiculous. Well, to be really frank with you, I suggest to you that first objection is one that you don't need to answer. You need to work out how to navigate it. Because, by the way, it's a public one. It's a throwaway. Have you ever noticed when they give you that one, it's almost impossible to overcome? There are two other layers, and if you can manage, negotiate, work your way down to these other layers, you will find that objection handling will just disappear because you will actually be dealing with the real issue. And, oh, that's really expensive. You go, oh, okay. Jenny, I have had a couple of people say that to us about our pricing, but I must admit, once they have experienced A, B, and C, which are the reasons why she chose you in the first place that you found out earlier in the meeting, price tends to disappear after they experience the result that delivers. That is one way to go. The other way to go is if they're on the phone and they're doing that, is you can simply create an authority position. This does require some training, but an authority position is simply, yes, I never use many. We have had a couple of patients say that to us. However, I do appreciate you may be ringing around, and if you aren't, I'd recommend you may. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to get lots of different comparative suggestions about how to deal with what you've asked me to quote on. And what I'd like to do to help you is I would like to extend a situation where you can ring me back after any one of those other phone calls and just bounce around with me what it is that you're concerned about that, and I'm going to help guide you to whatever that best solution is. Would that be something that would help you? Now, what we know is the more a patient talks to you, the more probable they are that they're going to buy from you. And all I've done is I've now set myself up as the authority to say, well, I'm prepared to talk to you about anybody else's quote. I will not be derogative. I will not degrade. I will not compliment either, but I will simply help the person understand the technicality so that they can truly understand. And I'll be very careful about how I do that. But what I know is if they talk to me 2 or 3 times, who are they going to book with? Me.
Yes, of course they are.
So, these two different approaches are different parts of the practice, but they do, as you would know, David, from your own practice and your own experiences, they do need some training. But once mastered, they can be very, very powerful things to overcome because we need to understand what the personal and ultimately the private objections are, because that's where the answers lie. And again, it comes down to, can you tell me a bit more about that? I'd love to get to understand your perspective around that. And we become curious and we allow people to share. And when people share, we solve.
And when we've solved their issues,
they buy.
They're more likely to proceed. Yeah, they buy.
Yeah, you don't have to close them. They will say to you, oh, okay, can I grab that? Oh, okay, can you book me in for that? Oh, okay, when would be the next appointment available? They will actually close the sale for you.
Yes.
It's fascinating, but it works.
Dentistry is a grudge buy, though, Neil. It's one of those things that people want to put off. If it's not hurting, they want to wait for it to hurt. It's even worse than buying tyres.
Yes.
We get told we need new tyres, and we say, "Oh, can we get another 5,000 kilometres out of those tyres?" Even though we might kill our family, but dentistry is even considered more of a grudge buy than tyres.
Yep.
And it's hard to convince. That's regular run-of-the-mill dentistry. Keeping your teeth. For the cosmetic stuff, that's a little bit easier because again, you're promoting how are you going to feel with these new teeth? What do you think your friends are going to say? What do you think your ex-husband's going to say?
Yep. Or more importantly, what it's going to be like when you meet your ex-husband's new wife for the first time. And us blokes have those same questions too, I might add. But David, people buy from people they trust. Okay? They only buy from people that they're sold to once. But they will buy frequently from the people they trust. And today, people trust people who listen to them. We simply need to get better at asking better questions.
Yes, it's the 2 ears and 1 mouth principle, isn't it? You should be listening twice as much as you're talking.
Well, that's an old one that's been going around for a long time, but yet it's still we haven't mastered it. So yet again, a lot of people know, but they don't do.
No, that's true. What did I say? It is people talking as if they're an optometrist. Everything is I, rather than you.
Yes, but the money's in the doing. We know the money is in the doing, not in the knowing.
Yeah, that's the truth. It's Mimi disease too. Again, I'm the doctor. You've got to listen to me, as opposed to how can I help you today?
This is exactly why we have so much success in working with cosmetic surgeons and, injectables and all of these areas, because it is an emotional business and they just need to learn to ask better questions.
They do. Well, Neil, that presentation, Persuasion is the New Black, certainly is an eye-opener for dentists who've never heard people who sell successfully in other industries and being saying, well, if that's how they do it, and I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed about dentistry. It's a vehicle for helping people get the products that they need.
Yep.
And so if I can take information from other industries that work well, then I can apply those principles in dentistry to be different from other dentists. It's not hard to stand out in the dental profession if you are different. It's very hard to stand out if you're just like everybody else.
Oh, isn't that so true? Yes. And, again, people will always remember, how you make them feel.
Yeah. Neil, you mentioned, and I brought it up here, but you mentioned also in business, and that's another thing that dentists are very poorly trained on at university and even after graduation is business. One of the terms that comes up in business often, in all businesses, is KPIs. Now, you mentioned that as healthcare professionals, as hairdressers, as doctors, as dentists, we should be concentrating more on KPAs rather than KPIs. Can you just finish off discussing that point?
I'd love to. It's one of my absolute favourite subjects. And if you don't mind, I might just share a brief story with you about my son who was wanting to compete at school in the 100-yard or 100-metre dash, I suppose we'd call it. And lo and behold, he did his first run and, well, didn't do very well. I think he and Lachlan came tied last as they ran up the thing laughing and joking to each other. But on the way home in the car, he actually said to me, Dad, I'd like to learn to run a bit quicker. Could you help me? I used to do triathlons many years ago. And I went, yeah, sure, mate. Look, let's go down the local park and go for a run. Something I still remember how much I puffed after so many years of not running. But it brought about a conversation. And the KPI was he simply wanted to go and run faster. And for the point of our exercise, I'm going to say that he was running in, record-breaking 30 seconds time for the 100-metre dash. and he wanted to get to 25 seconds, or even 20 seconds. Not even close to the record, but simply an aggregate, simply an improvement. And I sat down with him and I said, well, look, I think the first thing we need to understand is what are the things that you need to do to get better? So how are you starting? Are you going to stand up or are you going to crouch down? When you run, do you lift your arms? Do you lift your legs? What are you looking at? We went through all of these things and we broke them all down. And we spoke about each one and then we polished it back up and put it back into his rhythm of process. And then, of course, we finished with, what are you thinking at the time? Are you thinking you're going to come last or second last, you're going to just beat Lachlan over the line? Or are you actually thinking that you're going to be able to do this? Because if you think you can do it, you can do it. So the brain doesn't know the difference. So, and what we discovered out of that story was KPAs. What are the key performance actions you need to take to achieve the KPI? most business people I talk to, David, openly, throw around KPIs, but KPIs it's like going to the accountant. It's a finishing line. We look at historical data to establish KPIs. And then as a business owner, we normally lift them by 20% and tell everybody that's what we want, and then wonder why they don't achieve them. And lo and behold, it's because we don't break down the KPAs. What actions, what steps do they need to improve so that aggregated performance allows them to reach that stretch goal of growth? And when you break these things down, how do we answer the telephone, for example? I know that's something your wife's very passionate about. How do we answer the telephone? How do we meet and greet? How do we guide someone through the consultation? Because they're really going through three phases, choose us, choose me, choose more. It's just, the pathway is that simple, but we've got to break each of those steps down and talk about the KPAs. What are the action steps that need to be taken at each step to improve the overall cumulative performance, of which becomes known as the KPI? Anyone can divide 100 by 10 and come up with 10, but show me how to get to 10 is where the money is.
That's true, very true. So the KPI is the result, but the KPA are the steps. What are the things that have to improve you? What are the things that I have to do to improve myself when I'm talking with people? What are the things that I have to do to improve their perception of my company and my systems, my appearance at my company? Again, you can be a great salesman, but if your office looks like it's as one of my patients described where I worked as an assistant dentist in the 1980s, he said that old rooms that looked like a Turkish prison. Very hard to sell cosmetic dentistry in a Turkish prison. So again, all these things are in the back of people's minds and are sending negative thoughts. Why would I buy here? This place is, the carpet's dirty. There's dust here. They didn't stand up to greet me. All those little action steps along the way also help people to get into that positive buying mode.
Yeah.
And any negative signals that we send, persuade them or dispersuade them from. We have it in dentistry often where a patient will come in all excited, and then by the time they've met the dentist and they want to think about it, and it's nothing that the dentist has done. It's just something they've heard, something they've seen.
And it's something tiny, David. Something that's tiny. It's not the big things. It's the small things that push people off the rails. And they're all the KPAs.
Yep. So we've got to work on those.
And it requires much longer conversation, but to break these things down into bite-sized pieces. And more importantly, don't ask everyone to improve them all at once, because they'll just look at you, roll their eyes and go, oh, he's been off to another conference again. No. Break it down into bite-sized pieces that you focus on once a week or once a month, and then introduce the next step, And over time, you will have a tremendously successful business because people will take on board your suggestions.
Yeah, very, very important. Neil, we could talk, as you said, for a lot longer about the art of persuasion.
Yes.
And the art of getting results. And ultimately, that's what we're here for. We're here to get results for our clients.
Absolutely.
And if we believe in the product that we're selling or introducing to them, then we should be doing everything in our power to make sure that they purchase from us, because it's a lose for them if they don't, because they're not getting that great product.
I think we always, David, need to put the client first, but at the end of the day, let's not be shy about this. We're in business. And the definition of business is to sell or offer a product or a service at a profit. Look it up in the dictionary. That is the definition. Let's just follow the dictionary, mate.
That's true, Neil. If you're not making a profit, you're a charity.
100%. Why are you doing it? Pack up. Close the doors.
Yeah, often said that. Neil Osborne, anybody who's watching this who's in dental or knows people who are in other industries, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Just to duck to my website, Neil Osborne ultimatedentalpodcast.com.au, and you'll find a number of areas there that you can browse and reach out and have a chat. I'd love to have a conversation with you and see how Persuasion could play a part in your business. neilosborne.com.au.
Neil, thanks very much for being a guest on the Ultimate Dental Podcast.
My pleasure, David. My pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favourite podcast platform or watching on our website, subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and keep on tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.